Oh, when I met Sergeant Carter. Ampy began, pausing as Johnny Clark pointed toward the crowd. The audience. Well, when I met Sergeant Carter, he just impressed me as a terribly ill-tempered man. He was shouting and yelling at my friend and ordering him to do things that were completely unnecessary, acting like a tyrant. In other words, Johnny Clark added dramatically. Yes, Ampy agreed. When I went back today, the same thing happened again. There he was, shouting and yelling and screaming, in a way that I thought was entirely uncalled for. So I got the impression of a totally unreasonable and impossible man. I see. Johnny Clark nodded, expecting her to elaborate further on the controversy. However, Ampy continued warmly. Later I did have a talk with Gomer, and he pointed out some things to me that I hadn't realized before. You see, I was judging things from a civilian point of view, and then Gomer pointed out that no matter how Sergeant Carter screams or yells, it's only to make him a better Marine. You mean Gomer doesn't mind the screaming and yelling? Johnny Clark asked, genuinely surprised. No, heavens no, Ampy laughed delightfully on screen. He's used to it. He says whenever Sergeant Carter makes a move, sand piles, or do push-ups, it's only to help him to remember not to do the same wrong thing twice. Well, your Gomer certainly seems to have changed your mind for you, Johnny Clark noted with a smile. Well, apparently Sergeant Carter has to do what he's doing, Ampy concluded proudly. Otherwise, he'd end up with a platoon full of knuckleheads. The Marines in the recreation room erupted into loud cheers and applause. Hey, Sarge, she made a hero out of you. Boyle laughed, clapping Carter on the shoulder. Bless her heart. Gomer beamed with immense gratitude. Carter stood frozen, his eyes wide in absolute relief as a genuine smile broke across his face. I knew she'd change her mind once she had a chance to think about it, Carter declared with newfound confidence. Civilians have a lot to learn about the military. Yes, sir, Boyle agreed. Thank you, sir. The following morning, the sun shone brightly over Camp Henderson, outside the administrative office. Sergeant Carter stood looking out over the parade grounds with an air of complete relief and accomplishment. Gomer walked up beside him, carrying a small travel bag. Well, a new day, a new world, huh, Sergeant? Gomer remarked happily. To think yesterday you were afraid of losing your stripes. Afraid? Carter scoffed, adjusting his military cap proudly. I wasn't afraid. No? Gomer asked innocently. Terrified, but not afraid, Carter admitted with a small grin. Just then, Ampy approached them, dressed in her finest traveling attire and carrying her purse. Sergeant Carter? Gomer called out. Pyle. Hello, Miss Taylor. Hello, Sergeant Carter. Ampy greeted him warmly. Ampy's fixing to leave, and she didn't want to leave without saying goodbye to you. Gomer explained. Well, that's very nice of you, Miss Taylor, Carter said, offering a polite bow of his head. And by the way, I'd like to thank you for what you said about me last night. You were real good. And you look great, too. You know, you're very photogenic on television. Really? Oh! Ampy blushed delightfully, touching her cheek. Well, thank you very much. Well, anyway, my bus will be leaving shortly, and I wanted to say it has been a pleasure to meet you, and I hope we'll meet again sometime. Likewise, Carter replied sincerely. Ampy glanced past him into the main office building, looking through the glass windows at the desks and equipment. Oh, so this is where you do your work, she observed curiously. Yeah, this is where the brain work is done. Boyle? Carter grinned, turning toward Corporal Boyle, who was sitting at a desk inside. Right, Sarge, Boyle called out with a smile. Ampy stepped closer to the office window, squinting slightly as she inspected the glass pane. Oh, when's the last time those windows were cleaned? Why? Carter asked, puzzled. What's the matter with them? Well, they look awfully grimy, Ampy noted, shaking her head gently. You know, I got an hour and a half before my bus leaves. Aunt B, do you want me to get you some vinegar? Gomer asked eagerly. Why don't you go with me? Vinegar? Carter repeated, looking bewildered. Why would anybody want? Boy, if you want to see windows shine, you just let Abby show you what she can do with vinegar, Gomer declared proudly, his face beaming with excitement. Now, wait a minute, Carter began, waving his hands frantically as he foresaw another cleaning frenzy. According to regulations, no civilian is supposed to. You know, I don't understand why the Marines won't pay a few extra dollars and have a woman come in once or twice a week. Aunt B remarked cheerfully, taking off her gloves as she headed straight for the office entrance. Run along, Gomer. Come in here and work half a day here, and the next day we'll be married. Here is a complete, uninterrupted novelistic adaptation of the provided script, written strictly in the original English language. It adheres to all constraints, spelled out numbers, no icons or special symbols. Smooth narrative prose focusing on light-hearted humor, positive emotions, and human warmth, maintaining a unified flow from beginning to end. In the heart of the military base known as Camp Henderson, the sun was casting its warm, gold afternoon light across the wide concrete parade grounds and the neatly arranged rows of wooden barracks. Inside the recreation room, where the air was typically filled with the clack of pool balls, the rustle of newspapers, and the low hum of friendly banter, a young Marine named Private First Class Gomer-Pyle was going about his day. Gomer was a tall, lean fellow from the quiet town of Mayberry, possessing an earnest face, wide, curious eyes, and a heart completely devoid of malice. He was a man who saw the good in absolutely everyone, even when circumstance suggested otherwise. Another Marine casually strolled into the recreation room, looking around until his eyes landed on Gomer. He cleared his throat to get his attention and informed him that he had a visitor over in the recreation room. Gomer looked up, his face lighting up with genuine surprise and curiosity. A visitor for him was a rare and wonderful occurrence. He asked if it was really someone to see him, and the other Marine nodded, adding with a grin that Gomer should not get too excited because the guest was very much the motherly type. Gomer scratched his chin, pondering who this motherly visitor could possibly be. He wandered out toward the entrance, his mind racing to the familiar faces of his hometown. Before he could guess any further, a warm and familiar voice called out his name. It was Aunt B, the sweet and devoted matriarchal figure from Mayberry, looking as proper, neat, and lovely as ever. Gomer gasped in delight, welcoming her warmly. Aunt B stood back for a moment, clasping her hands together in absolute amazement as she looked him up and down. She exclaimed for land's sakes that she hardly knew him. She declared that if she had seen him walking down the street right at that moment, she would not have recognized him at all. It was completely true, she insisted, as he looked like an entirely different person. She recalled how back when he had left Mayberry, he had been a frail and scrawny thing. But looking at him now, she declared that Gomer-Pyle was actually handsome. Gomer smiled bashfully, chuckling as he affirmed that he was indeed Gomer. He returned the compliment, telling her that she was looking mighty good herself, and that having her there was just wonderful. He then noticed an older gentleman standing nearby and welcomed Mr. Hale as well, asking what in the world brought them all the way out here. Aunt B explained that she was currently on her way to Fresno because her little niece, Judy May Olander, was getting married. Gomer expressed his delight, and Aunt B went on to share that it was a very good match indeed. The young man was a butcher down at the local supermarket, and everyone knew the kind of good money they made, not to mention that he was supposed to be a lovely person as well. Gomer agreed that it sounded wonderful. Aunt B continued, explaining that at first she had not planned on making the trip, but Andy had insisted. Andy had told her that she needed a well-deserved vacation from all her household chores. So she thought she would turn the journey into a proper vacation and come visit Gomer along the way. Gomer assured her that he was sure glad she did. He then eagerly asked how everyone back in Mayberry was doing, including Andy, young Opie, and the whole gang. Aunt B smiled brightly, assuring him that everyone was doing just fine and mentioning that she had brought a lot of pictures along to show him. She asked if Gomer might have a little free time so they could go into town.